in a space where we're able to just meet and do the work as necessary and don't have to commute into an office every day because that's
Will you
kind of the
remind
rule.
us the ins and the outs of Tactical Neuroscience, your company?
Yes, absolutely. So, tactical neuroscience is the understandings and discoveries that I made during my PhD research on stress and decision making, taken from a laboratory setting out into an applied methodology, essentially, that works to help improve decision making before, during, and then after extremely stressful events. Is the
Beautiful.
short explanation.
Beautiful. That sounds almost exactly like what I heard you say in 2019. You are
That means I'm
that
practiced.
integrated, that aligned with your mission that you know what it is, you're continuous in it. And that's how I feel too,
Cool.
in regards to this military resilience work, which in 2019, I thought you were one of our military people, remember?
Yes. I was like, oh no, 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 no. Yeah. Full civilian. Full civilian. Yeah.
And so everything happens for a reason. I mean, here we are again. I mean, 5 years later,
Yeah.
almost.
Holy cow.
I know, just holy moly. And then, so for me, my big thing is that, and this is exactly probably what I said to you in 2019 when I asked to talk. The whole point is that we, the American people, cannot justify the rate of suicides with our American military. And yes, it's a loaded subject. And yes, it's deserving of our attention. And yes, there are ways to navigate and circumvent disaster in every situation. So, mandatory health building wellness needs to happen before people are allowed to sign off on base, before
Mhm.
people are allowed to have that official detachment. That mandatory health minded workshop needs to be intact and in play. Now, the military is awesome at starting to get on this train, and the Army is already integrating active duty based and catered to active duty resiliency
Cool.
and readiness to move between the big moments within one's posts. Um, so whether it's a new deployment or a whole new company that one is going to, and there's just such fragmented space there really previously for people to be able to get integrated. So the lieutenant colonel who I spoke to said, this would be really great as something that just continuously is is acknowledged and actually integrated throughout the happening of the whole career of our service
Yeah.
members, every branch. At the time that I met you, I was in the Sierra Nevadas. Were you in Boise, Idaho in 2019 too?
I don't think so. I moved here in 2019, so I may have been still in South Dakota when we chatted the first
Oh,
time, in early
aw.
early 2019. Yeah. But I think to your point, and one of the things I want to make sure we highlight today is that this idea of understanding how to be well or how to understand, stress resistance or how to understand what your body's doing during stress and practicing things that help to mitigate that, to decrease it. It's like golf. You never win. You hopefully get better, right? But the more you understand about how it works, the better you can be. And it's something that you have to practice diligently over time. And that's where oftentimes I'll get brought in as tactical neuroscience for like a 2 hour seminar. And the response afterwards is like, oh my gosh, we need to talk a lot more. And I say, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it because I can help you set up for those strategic the strategic roadmap of how to build these into your everyday things that you're doing. And it doesn't take a massive shift, but it's the same thing with practicing anything. The more you practice, the better you get at it. And once you understand, especially from my perspective, the neuroscience mechanisms that underlie all of these things, it feels like you're cheating, but you're not. You're just knowing what the system's doing and how to modulate it. But you have to do it continually before, during, and after. I think it's the
Are you speaking to independent contracting work on bases that you do at times, Justin?
So I would say what's fascinating for me is that a lot of my contacts that I had that were very involved with the global war on terror have now separated or are now transitioned to the private sector. And so I still have some contacts and like percolating things that are happening within the active military and law enforcement, law enforcement community and federal government. But some, I would say, much more recently has picked up in the private sector. So advising like Fortune 50 company executives and that kind of stuff. Where again, it's similar. These are stressful decisions. What I like to tell those individuals is like, look, yes, you have a decision that's going to be, it's like literally a 10 or $20 million decision to make. But at the end of the day, you're going to get to go home and have dinner with your family. So the stress that you're experiencing, while it feels very acute and perceived as stress, and it is very stressful, recognize that in the giant context of things, this is different. And usually that's also an eye opener. They say, oh, yeah, you're right. This is stressful. This is my job. But my life is not on the line. And so that's where I'm pretty selective in terms of the groups that I work with in the civilian world, um, just because I want to make sure that I'm giving the advantage to our individuals that are going into harm's way.
We feel even more special that you're here today. I know I said that it's like nothing has changed and everything is exactly as you stated in 2019. I'm wondering, in hindsight, what have you implemented anew? What have you evolved within your offerings for those people who might have been had a handle on you back in the day,
Yep.
been in
Yep.
contact, and now might be curious of what's happened
Yeah.
there?
No, absolutely. I appreciate that. I would say uh, two major things have happened. One, not on purpose, but I've just found that I've just been decreasing my social media presence, which was kind of the main avenue into exposure. Two reasons for that. One is, everybody that I felt that needed to get a hold of me, I now have not everybody. The people that were most interested, we reached out, connected, and then kind of it's the percolating. It's the word of mouth community, right? So it's very much, you know, you have to know somebody to know somebody. And so I was really trying hard at the very beginning for how to kind of increase that exposure. So I'm still on social media. If you want to contact me, please feel free at Tactical Neuroscience. That's a great way to get a hold of me. I have the website tacticalneuro.com. Also a great way to fill out the form there and contact me. The other part too is how I look about or how I go about telling the stories that are involved and delivering the messages. Uh, I've gotten much better. This is just personal growth. I've gotten much better at conveying these large neuroscience ideas in smaller bite-sized packets in terms of how do you bring those in and how do you think about them versus me saying, here's everything. And that comes with time. I think that's me being an improved storyteller. But also kind of a sub like a 2.8 bullet point to that would be making sure that I'm very attuned to what is it that either group or client or customer, what do they want? Like what do they really need? And oftentimes, not on purpose, but they'll say, we need this. I say, okay, great, describe that for me. And they're describing something else than what they're actually saying that they want. And so when you're able to meet both of those, it really makes it so it's a really solid kind of engagement. And usually, um, again, this is what makes tech neuroscience very unique is it's just me. Like there's not a huge company behind me because this is such um, specific information and this audience is very specific. These are individuals who have chosen to go into harm's way for an occupation or career and to literally help others that they will never meet. And so it's very much a customized, tailored experience in terms of what is it you want to know, what is it you want to work on, and what is it you want to improve for you or your group. I work with both individuals and groups. And how do we go about that? And how can I make sure I leave you with things that you can think about, for years to come? And one of my favorite things to hear is this is how again. I'll tell a short story of how small the world is. Had an individual that was going through very selective training. And I had been talking with that group a little bit about kind of the things that they need to think about when they're bringing people through their training. And then I had somebody that texted me and says, "Hey, do you know so and so?" I was like, "I do. Yes." This is the person that was leading the training. He goes, "Yeah, I'm in that training now." I was like, "Oh, that's exciting." Then I texted the trainer and I said, "Hey, just so you know, somebody is hip to what you're doing because I've talked to them before, worked with them in the past as well." And so it was just like really fun. You know, they didn't know that they each knew they had connected with me individually, but when they kind of made those dots, it was just really fun because they were like, "Man, this sounds exactly like what Justin talked about." They're like, "I see the things that Justin talked about that I should be doing here in this program. Holy cow!" And then he's like, "Do you know anything about this?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's good to hear that they've gone." And that was, I think, probably a year or 2 years after that initial engagement, and so that was
Wow.
pretty awesome.
So
Yeah.
really
So
memorable content. Okay, case in point, question before we get on to you experiencing my exercise of
yeah,
brevity
yeah,
in the sharing of the workshop outline, the innards of it as well. But the intention is to practice that brevity,
mm,
fine tune, skip some slides so that we can get to the exercise part to
cool.
give context, because I was looking at everything, the momentous progress you've made, the extraneous details of your career, and how you also really enjoy factualizing information visually and graphs and stuff. And I thought, ooh, I didn't know that when I asked him to come talk. Even the second time, I still hadn't known that. So one question in respect to everything that you're sharing in working with the private sector, which I'm guessing is, and I have to fill in the blanks here because we're talking tactical, we're talking people who are doing the work, going in harm's way that no one else wants to do. And then we marry that with private sector. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, maybe he's talking about like secret missions. Okay, nonetheless, whatever it is, and I'm sure there's more information on that answer at your website, right?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And
Okay.
I'll be as blunt here as I can. I get contacted by foreign governments like, "Hey, can you come train us?" And my answer is no,
Hmm.
as politely as possible,
Very good.
because again, this is information that's theoretically everything's public, but how it's organized and put together is not, right? And that's something where it's like that truly is an advantage. And
Also,
I'm
I saw and read about a man who was, I think, a pilot in the Navy, was very, very good. Did you read about that too?
yeah, yeah,
Yes. And it
yeah.
took a while. Did he ever get out? I know his wife was advocating for him heavily.
I don't know what the result of or the resolution of that story was, but I think that's something too where it's like I'm
You don't want to get
acutely
thrown
aware.
in jail by your own
No, no,
country for
no,
sharing stuff
exactly.
just because you made an inclusive statement and you inclusively engaged audiences beyond
Yeah,
our nation.
yeah,
Totally. And it's just, I think that I sense that you're not coming from fear. You're coming from love of country when you exclude. It just feels maybe too convoluted to add in so many extras. Like,
yeah,
why? We have so much need. We're such a large country. We're so heavily saturated population wise and with different economically. I mean,
yeah,
there's so many businesses, just 45,000 nonprofits alone are catered exclusively to supporting our military. And again, I'm reiterating that the whole point of this is that we can't really justify the rate of suicides in the American military. We need to mandate before official departure, before saying bye-bye to everybody, before they completely retire themselves from the military, a health-minded workshop, not just about financial health, which is incredibly, I continue to learn about this area. I just started reading books in my late third decade about that. So hallelujah for that. Moving forward, there's the career training, there's the finance, the career, the how to utilize the GI Bill. It's just that oftentimes people are so ready and itching to leave the base
mm,
that that information goes in one ear and out the other ear because it's not exactly engaging. It's a lot of spoken information and written
yeah,
information. And one needs to be in a place where one can be receptive to such great information. And if one is feeling less than about where they should be, if one is feeling, well, I trained day in and day out to stand up for my country and follow my orders in extreme circumstance, and I never actually got to live in those extreme circumstances abroad. One thinks that they are just not good enough, undeserving, not as paralleled and in sync with their peers who have gone off and done, as you say, just putting oneself in a position that no one else wants to be in. So this workshop, I like you've fine-tuned, you've finessed, and you've boiled down, whittled down your art so that you can create a compartmentalized offering where you might address one aspect of it and then they say, oh my gosh, this is so great, because they were able to grasp it because you boiled
Yeah.
it down, because you didn't throw it in their face like you
Yeah.
gesticulate.
Yeah.
you know so that's what this is. And I am so grateful that we have you. I'm so grateful that we know you a little bit more. You are a true hero for putting yourself in the way of aligning with such high intensity work.
Mhm.
People who are aligned with people who do this work are often, or also in the way of potential harm, maybe not physically per se, or having the wrath of people who disagree with actions um, uh, played out, orders delivered, but just the vicarious traumatization component of
Mhm.
taking on such depth and
Yeah.
well, let me say this, taking on so much weight, because the
Yeah.
depth is actually, I think, what saves us. It grounds us. If we can go deep into inquiry and self-inquiry, then the weight is no longer as laborious.
Yeah. Recognizing that it's there and the brevity of it, I think, is very important. And one of the questions I enjoy answering is why do tactical neuroscience? And the right, many reasons. One of the main reasons for me is my youngest brother is still a police officer. And he's a police officer every day when he goes to work. And so for that, it was the idea of how do I take the information that I was able to discover using neuroscience, basic science research, which is incredibly hard, 6 years of my life, and turn that into actionable things that individuals can do when they're going through stressful situations. And so that's something where I've had that recently where someone's like, why do you do this? And I was like, well, number one, it's not my full-time job. That's okay. I do it when it's available and necessary. Mostly because, as you know, working with these really specialized areas in the military at large, unless you are providing a thing, a widget, like an actual device, it's hard to get that, brought in so that you can do uh, the continuation of it is sometimes difficult because people change jobs all the time. People are coming and going, right? They're transitioning through their positions, through their ranks, which is good. And I think that's healthy for the military for sure, and the government in large. Um, but it's just fascinating because that's one of the things that people are, why do you do this? And the other fun part, what is very humbling for me, is when I do get to go and be with those individuals while they're in full kit, while they're on the range, while they're doing their training, it's really fun because oftentimes, and I'm usually wearing just like, a shirt like this and like the hat, or I have a long sleeves on, all that kind of stuff. And they're just like, who are you and why are you here? So I blend in enough. I stick out enough with the beard to where they're like, you're not a regular guy, but why are you here? And I'm like, I'm here to help you guys out. And so it's very humbling in that sense. And they do a really good job of taking me into their wing and making sure that uh, I'm included in part of that group, which is very humbling. But yeah, it is very important work, and I think on all aspects when you think about health, it's a continuum, it's a spectrum, and building anything that you can build for yourself that helps you be healthier and more well is very important, right? And I kind of come back to that idea of this is something to practice. You can expose yourself to ideas and to certain methodologies and training, but I'm also the mindset of do what works for you. I know as a scientist, the placebo effect is extremely powerful. So if
Mm.
you believe something is working, you may reap the benefits of that. Not all the time, right? And there's a lot of things out there that are, uh, sold that are they're not real, snake oil stuff. But uh, if you understand that what you're attempting to do and it doesn't cause you or others harm, right? And you're doing physical activity or exercise for your own benefit, continue to do that. That's very important. We know exercise is extremely important in reducing stress. Also, with thinking about how do you compartmentalize, how do you conceptually go through certain things, right? And so I think that's what we're going to get into here is understanding what's happening and also how do you think about it.
Yes, and we're going to piggyback off of everything that you just said, Justin, and remember a quote by Dale Carnegie that says, "Knowledge is not power, knowledge applied is power." So Justin has 6 years of neuroscience, including a PhD education. Then how do you fine tune that and deliver it in ways that's digestible and interactive? And that's the same thing with me, is this is based on the shoulders of 5 years of interviews with our service members and then my health sciences degree. And so a lot of information. Okay, great. My heart, soul, mind is in it. The experiential feedback is in it. My research is in it. Okay. Well, how do we interact with this material? That's the funnest part. This is proving to be the funnest part for me. Is this is
Cool.
actually the most challenging part, is how do we create exercises now? So I have several exercises that keep coming to me and I'm like, oh yay, whatever, they get downloads. And like people always talk about when we're most relaxed, ideas just come in. So hallelujah for taking time, downtime, taking care of ourselves, no matter what weight is on our shoulders, remembering to always do so. And I am going to the share screen, as you can see now. And we are in now this veteran specific. At times, are you open to reading them so it's more engaging and we're more in this together? And questions. So there is no, we're going to skip some slides, Justin. There is no interruption. There's contribution. There's
Right.
no, so what are you wondering about? What you're wondering, that's the juice here. That's what really
Cool.
is going to mobilize. Yes. So we see the I am for transition. And I also have been thinking in context to everyone, because it's the tool for everyone, loved ones of service members, supporters of service members, and also just everyone. So to look at it as I am ready and willing, because it's a mindset within ourselves that we're ready and willing to move through something, anything, whatever it is. So this applies for everyone, whether you have your uniform on or your uniform is off. And then we learned that the identity association model, the IAM is standing for identity association model. And that is speaking to and calling to the interrelationship of identities within self, not the identities that we have grown to all be super investigative of, whether, so not the sexual identities, not the racial identities, but the inward identities of self. What are we identifying with within ourselves? That's where our power is as people. And then we have this slide where we look and acknowledge the different experiences that I've had. And as I'm speaking, I'm just going to read a couple, and your eyes can zoom over what is on this screen that you can see, which
Yeah.
is just having some scholarships, doing virtual facilitation of workshops since 2020, supporting, dedicating a part of my book, my yoga book and trauma cooperative yoga, TCY, the Take Care of Yourself yoga, the extra level of less stringency, less performative nature, but and more inquiry to practice. It's another tool to practice. What do I need right now? And then how do I take initiative to meet that need? And then we talk about some of my interpersonal, my familiar relationships, some unbeknownst to me until my mid-30s, of my great uncle translating for JFK on more than one occasion, and my grandmother working for over a decade at NASA and supporting Alan Shepard's big launch. And I just found a picture of her waving on the jet, the presidential jet, to see John Glenn orbit around the Earth 3 times in a row, I believe it was. Fact check me, guys, on that. So what is this work about? It's about reducing potential harm and suicides for the American transitioning military, and how to create a better effective self relationship, locating ourselves in difficult moments, choosing who we're becoming, and having a tool and a picture in our mind of how to do so, which comes into the visual aspects, and asking people to have a buddy in this process. So say this work is being presented to people in a group, this is where we say, hey, choose a buddy, because battle buddies are everything. Not that this is a battle. And oftentimes, I know when I told my therapist years ago that life felt like a battle, she said, well, that's actually not how life is supposed to feel. Oh, okay. So there's a different
What?
way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a different way. And then we have that reiterated, which we've seen, if you watching this have watched any of the other ones, you'll see that we do recognize that this work is so prominently necessary, because we have 4 times as many as recognized by Brown University in the Northeast of our beautiful nation. 4 times as many people causing death versus actually encountering death when they were on the field. So this is combat service member related. So this is people who have returned, been able to come home to American soil, and then coming home to self was at a loss. And then we look at, well, why would this maybe be the case? And things like lower level of education, physical injuries that have yet to be mindfully or skillfully navigated, those unseen mental scar tissue yet to be mindfully navigated. We move forward and we see that the disconnection from self is the very definition of trauma itself. That's wild to think that. So psychologists around our nation recognize that the very definition of trauma itself is to be disconnected from the self. That speaks volumes, because the I am, the identity association model for everyone, is meant to be a reconnective modality. And I know I use it day in and day out when I notice the nature of my story and I create an inquiry. I can ponder, well, what is this? And that's in the exercise portion. So having a continuity of structure, and we're talking mental structure, because normally when we receive an order, it enters into our mind first, and then we enact that with the physicality of carrying out whatever order. So having the mental structure that falls by the wayside and is completely lost at that time of transitioning out from one major role to another major role in the all around the clock mission that is being a part of the United States military. It's incredibly demanding, more demanding than any corporate job, more demanding than anything you can ever imagine. So how do we integrate that mental structures where people can self-identify, where we can self-relate in ways that is non-judgmental, non-negatively judgmental of ourselves? And then we talk about some of the service members' challenges as in the military, which can be chalked up to a lot of different things that our service members and the other versions of this in sharing this have nodded their heads and said this, yep, this is exactly it. I've given way for you to say, hey, service members, tell me what's incorrect. So far, nothing there. This can be shared selectively. So if you're watching this and you're wondering, what are they looking at? I do need to expedite the navigation of this. And Justin and you're going to hear both of us reading this and talking about this and relating to it as we continue to go on. To name a couple challenges during those service years, things feeling isolation. And then ironically, in addition to that, feeling the loss of family planning and time. So loss of privacy and personal space, rather. So we have this loss of privacy and personal space, and then these feelings of isolation all at once. And then we have a mention of formalities, extreme stress regarding formalities and how to act and how to be in any given moment, that when one can retreat into oneself, it sure is a feeling of solace sometimes to kind of just shut down, which can be advantageous and can be harmful. And so when we do retreat, what's running through our bandwidth? What's running
And are
through
you
our
doing it in a healthy way?
Yes, retreating in having a moment of self-reflection so that when there is that engagement with everyone who you're living on top of and very tight circumstances, that there is that sense of camaraderie that is so necessary for a unit to act as one when there's a common language which is given to service members, of course, already around how to operate and function in highly stressful situations like Justin helps with. However, there's always those moments of decompression where we come up upon ourselves and other people, and there can be a refined way of integrating this information, like the Lieutenant Colonel Terry Courtney suggested, where it's integrated in the actual transitions that are happening from company to company or unit to unit or squadron to squadron, rather than just at the final saying goodbye and the official detachment from the military. So the transitioning challenges, I speak to the hyper reliance on outside orders and how that can lessen personal autonomy. The cohesiveness of purpose, obviously, that falls by the wayside. So where does one get to touch upon one's own continuity of self? How's there a narrative that says, I'm going to acknowledge where I've been. I'm going to acknowledge the indoctrination that I've been in and the valueness and the fruitfulness and how that's kept me alive. And also, how do I build upon the indoctrination of being hypervigilant and on point always? How do I build upon that so that it builds into my life as I interact with the world at large? That's just one tiny example. Anything there, Justin?
Yeah, I think lots there. Number one, from my thoughts are the idea of recognizing the hypervigilance is fascinating from many aspects, but the neuroscience perspective, the reason why you're hypervigilant in a combat situation is so you can stay alive. The downside is your brain starts to set that as the default state, meaning that's the normal operation mode. And then when you come to a civilian world, you're not driving around running errands to go get groceries looking for IEDs in the road, right? Very, 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 very low probability of that happening in your hometown. Yet, if that's what you've been doing for a year plus over and over again, it's really hard to switch that off. And so, one of the things that I like to emphasize for individuals is find something, an activity that helps you with that specific skill that you've practiced and honed that kept you alive, hypervigilance, and apply it, right? And what's really cool is I'll just use an example that's personal to me, but there is a massive dearth, meaning we have a very lack of youth referees and umpires and people that want to ref these games because so many people scream at referees, right? We're changing that culture in youth sports. I have young children, so we're changing that culture, saying, look, when you come to the game, these are not professional athletes, these are your kids. The person who is umpiring or refereeing the game is typically a volunteer being paid a very low wage to cover their gap to get to the game. They're there so we can play the game. Let's support everyone together. But I could tell you some of the best individuals I've seen that are refs are former individuals from the military veterans, because they're really good at noticing all of these things. They can take in a large spectrum in terms of what they're visually seeing and listening to, and they know the rules. They're very rule oriented, right? So I'm not saying you have to be a referee. Like that's a very specific example, but find something like that that helps you to practice those skills so you have an outlet for them, that your brain can kind of say, okay, I can relax now because I know at 7 p.m. tonight I have a game that I'm going to be refereeing and I can save my hypervigilance for then. So you practice that idea of turning it on and off, right? This is a skill set where we're really good as humans of getting ramped up, right? Getting amped up. We're good at that. It's hard for us. It takes a lot of practice to work on ramping yourself down to come back to a relaxation state. We try all these really extreme things like going, and spending a bunch of money and going to the spa days or all these different things and activities. There's a whole industry set up to do it, right? And is it helpful or not? Perhaps it is in some cases, but you have to be able to practice and do that internally as well. So the idea of setting those kind of milestones for yourself, and activities that you find fun. That's very important because you have to go want to do it, but also help to leverage some of those things that are on this side from the transitioning challenges that you can then apply to the civilian world. And I could tell you, uh, it is so appreciated when you have a ref that you could tell is doing their best job and they're trying, they're present, and they're really working to make sure it's a very fair game that's being played safely for our kids. Like that is amazing, and it's an incredible contribution to the community. And so, again, I'm using the referee as an example, but it's one of those where uh, there's many opportunities like that. Find the one that you think is exciting. I think that's what I'm trying to say as well.
I love it because just from a spiritual perspective, Justin, I've noticed that in my own healing of my post-traumatic stress over the years, that I've self-identified as taking this hypervigilance of feeling like everything needs to be in a particular order, or else the whole world is going to fray by its side and fall apart. Turning it into hyper awareness. So through meditation, which I'm sure you advocate for, yes,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I that allows us to take that wondering, that back seat where we can wonder about ourselves and present momentness and become more watchful of ourselves. And in that watching, that hypervigilance is translated to that hyper awareness, 360 degrees, what's going on, while maintaining my rest and digest, my
Mhm.
autonomic nervous system in rest and digest, and having, like you said, that extra edge. People who have gone through so much in our lives tend to be better at a lot of stuff because we're just more present. We're more relative. We're going, this is happening, yes, and it's relative. I've endured a lot of stress in my life. Is this really something that, not to minimize, but to best navigate through non-reactivity, which the identity association model does speak to and work toward? Anything here that made you scratch your head, wonder in a puzzled way?
No, no, I think these are all uh, very prominent known challenges. I think where it gets difficult for individuals that are going through the transition from military to civilian life is they hear these all the time, but they may not have experienced them yet, right? So the last one, they're normal civilians and the alienation of Bed Island, right? So I think that's something where the idea of practice, one of the things I would suggest would be before you completely separate the DD 214, right? Go and spend a long weekend where you're the only person who's in the military and see what that's like. Do that a couple of times before you completely separate, knowing that you have to go back to the world that you're in currently, but kind of having that idea of like, oh, it's sort of the, it's like a tasting menu. Like you can find out what you do and don't
And
like, right? Do you like,
imagine going and doing that self-imposed experiment of socialization and being the only non-military person intentionally. Of course, we can't control that. You might show up somewhere and
yeah,
go,
yeah,
well, there's all these people, but
yeah,
and they are people who have transitioned out very effectively.
yeah.
Knock on wood. So there might be role models in that too. Um, so the one that I've seen service members scratch their head over, and then they go, well, yes, but
Mm,
yes, or and yes, I can see that. The lack of knowing the why when in active
mm.
order throughout the years can create a foundation for a lack of necessary self-inquiry before action taken, which is what the identity association model is trying to reprogram when doing that official, you said DD 214,
Mhm.
that official
That's like the
detachment
separation
from
from.
the,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right, that
yeah.
official detachment from the military. Um, we need to be, I think service members are in that hyper reactivity mode because that is what is keeping people alive in the field or in theater, as it's oftentimes called, in the actual situational stuff that is life or death.
Mm,
And yet, so I think a lot of pontification and self-reflection might be looked at as dreary and almost deadful, like it would actually create a death for people. And yet people are able to interchange being super aware and responsive quickly. I know in yoga, just practicing the discipline of putting yourself in these odd positions and having to respond quickly when you notice that one muscle is suddenly no longer supporting the other muscle the way it
Mhm.
should, and being so fine-tuned that you almost can't even tell. There's no knee-jerk reaction. There's just immediate integration of that information and responsiveness that
Yeah.
it is also equally as life-saving. Um,
And that's on a physical level. And what's
right,
driving
but
that
that
is your
starts in the
nervous
mind.
system, right? That's exactly it. That's you got yeah, you got right to the point, right? That's exactly what's happening inside your brain as well, right? Is when certain systems start to fatigue, other systems, if appropriate, will try and pick up the slack, right? And so that's something where and one of the things I like to highlight this, or perhaps another way to describe the lack of the knowing the why is understanding as the transition goes through your your level, I'll just say the word agency, your level of agency is transitioning from one of a group to your own. And that is also sometimes very scary. Now, what do I do? Where do I fit into this whole thing, whole place?
And
And I think
where's my
that's some,
group?
correct. Where's my group? We are absolutely social beings. We are social creatures. We need to have social interactions. Clearly, there's tons of research on that. With
And Justin,
yeah,
where are the people who are looking out for me? Where is my group? And where are the people who are looking out for me? Which is just a no-go in normal, in our society, the way that our society is created, is it's the slap in the face. You mean I'm the only one who's thinking about, if this person can't be there on time, then I should need to stay longer or whatever, and shift change or something as minuscule, seemingly insignificant, can really be highly charged and triggering for a service
mhm,
member just transitioning, because it's that realization, like you say, oh my
yep,
goodness, this is me, this
yep,
is on me. um, to kind of care about myself also, because we're kind of used to people looking out for us as well. Unwavering dependence on decisions made by others can cause negations to one's own sense of selfhood and sense of agency. Unwavering dependence on decisions made by others can eventually create a challenge to remember that we do need to think about ourselves, and to kick that, what part of the brain that in your research is being called upon to segue, to transition from receiving information and enacting the actions, doing the actions that I need to do. So if my mom tells me something that I need to do something, okay, we're going to go back to infantile demonstration
mhm,
here. And then
mhm,
I just wait for mom or dad to tell me everything, which funny enough, the military oftentimes does say to people in boot camp, we are your parents now. We are
mhm.
your family. So, and then suddenly I've got to go out into the world and go to like public school where mom and dad are at work or whatever all day long until late in the evening. Now it's me making what part of the brain does agency come from?
Yeah, all of it is the short. I don't mean to be flippant when I say that. Uh, this is you're really hitting on the point of, and this is from the neuroscience perspective, the idea of our brain is incredibly I'm doing this because this is my hand gesture for the brain now, right? Our brains are incredibly complex, and the parts of your brain that are running all the like. There's not the fallacy of like, oh, you're only using 10% of your brain. If you're only
Mm.
using 10% of your brain, you're dead. Like, let's
Oh,
just be very clear about that. There's no part where it's kind of, think of it like the radio, right? The radio is always on. There's always radio waves going everywhere. It's just, what are you tuned into now? What signal are you really focusing on, right? I think that's so. The country station is still playing. The rock and roll station is still playing. The news is still playing. There's actually different bands of radio. There's a full spectrum. Like, so it's using
so
the
if
radio
I'm
as kind of the
tuned into my needs and I'm not
yes,
looking to someone else to be tuned into said needs, then that
yes,
focus, as you say, what am I focusing on?
correct.
And
And
so
are
it's
you
practice,
practiced? Oh,
isn't
good.
it? Practice. Yes, it's practice of
Yes.
focusing on said
Yeah.
needs, which, okay, so we're on the same radio
We are.
station.
Yes, and 2 points to that. So one, you're exactly right, focusing on what those needs are, and then also recognizing where are those external. I'm pointing out what externally delivered or in or internally delivered uh, actions, right? So is it, I'm going to go have breakfast now, and this is what I'm going to have for breakfast because that's what I want, or are you being told this is breakfast, eat it? right?
Right. You need to
And
go
those are,
to the chow hall now or the mess hall now
yep,
if you're
yep,
going to eat anything and we don't know what's going to be there. What a different
correct.
process than to mindfully go, okay, I'm going to drive myself somewhere where I can get whatever I want. I mean, holy moly, holy being inundated with, and that's a belief shift. That's
It's
not
a
only an
full
experiential
restructuring of your
shift.
neural structure. Exactly.
Say it again.
It's a whole restructuring of your neural pathways. Because you're now living in a world that you have a level of complexity with the choices available to you that on purpose the military strips away, right? And I
Why
think
do you
that's
think
thing where
that is?
there's,
Why do you think that stripping away occurs?
oh, for effectiveness. You don't want 20 people saying, why are we doing this? Like, this is what you need to be doing right now, and this is why we're doing it. And I think that's the part of the military world versus the civilian world. In the civilian world, uh, it's very much as a choose your own adventure, right? And in the military world, you get to say, I'd like to be on that adventure path, but the actual choosing of how that adventure occurs is not your choice.
Got it.
Which goes back to the beginning of those individuals that do deploy and go directly into places that are high risk, and those individuals that do all the training that actually never get a chance to, or for whatever reason do not deploy, right? They feel like they have a very different experience because they never actually go and got to do it live. Or often what we know is that training is sometimes more dangerous than actually going downrange, which is terrifying, right? So it's like they did all the really hard stuff without actually going into where there's, not a real risk, but a real enemy there. But the training is sometimes as risky or more risky than actual in actual combat situations. Not all the time. Sometimes I have to caveat that. But I think back to that point of the neural pathways involved with those choices and leveraging different parts of your brain. Our prefrontal cortex, this is about, sits right about here, that houses a lot of our executive functions. So that idea of, okay, this is everything that's happening, all that's going on both inside me and around me, the environment that I'm in. How do I navigate that? And what do I do to make the best choice possible? That's a different question if you're in the military environment versus if you're in the civilian environment. Best choice possible in the military environment is the best choice possible for the people standing next to me and on my side and myself. But oftentimes it's for the others that you're there with
So if we
when you're
don't
in this.
know that there's new, if we don't know that there's new neural pathways to be navigated, then
Yeah.
it's highly improbable, unlikely that we are going to be able to exercise said diligence, said ability, said discipline.
Yeah. It's like you going to a racetrack and you've never seen the racetrack before, and they're saying go as fast as you can and get your best time. Whereas, kind of what you're proposing, and which I think is very helpful, here's a picture of the racetrack. Here's a Google Earth view of it. Here's a topographical map, giving them all the information ahead of time and be able to practice it mindfully. How are you going to run, or how are you going to run, or how are you going to run or drive around or ride around this racetrack, right? Which is a
Right.
civilian
Because
world.
we're not only saying thank you, and thank you for that compliment of that practicality of addressing things by introducing some new ways to engage new neural pathways.
Yeah.
And what did I start off with, a saying that I wanted to thank you, and then the thank you took over. Okay.
You're
We
like
will,
transferring. Just so you
well,
know, too,
oh,
I have about
it's like
10
as
more
you're,
minutes. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I just make sure I just want to tell you my
okay,
time check. I have about 10 minutes and I have to run to something else. But yes, keep going. Yeah, yeah,
okay. We have to meet again because we are just like one toe in.
yeah. Okay.
We must find a way for me to be able to translate your generosity of focus and focusing on this for some way that I can focus on anything that might be of support. This identity association model might actually resonate with you in ways that it might open up new portals of discovery within your own work. Not that it's
Yeah.
in maybe direct relationship, but sometimes it's like learning how to work on a car engine can
Yep.
sometimes, that person might aspire one day to become a neuroscientist. And the
Yeah.
things that they learn in that infrastructure of working on the all the high amazing level of detail that's in a car engine and how everything has a relationship with different areas of the car. It's kind of like how our minds has a relationship with all different parts of our other organs. Our heart is an incredibly powerful organ. It's said to actually overwhelm the neurological parts of ourselves, that our hearts take the driver's seat.
And recognizing that it's all one system, right? I
Yes.
think that's the other kind of thing that people think about, or people forget to think about, is it's all once, like, our physical bodies are all one system, right? It's not like you take your arm off the end of the night and you set it over on the nightstand and go to bed. It's always
Unless you
there.
do.
Unless you do. Yeah, unless you do. That's true. Unless you do, then yes, take it off. But our brains are stuck inside our head, and it's all talking all the time. It's connections that are going, we usually say both ways, but in reality, it's millions of ways in this, wild dimensionality. So I think recognizing that is extremely important as well. And, if parts are out of sync, not just within your brain, but also the rest of your body, like, when you have a stomach ache, it's very, very visceral experience. And we don't always know when our brains are having the version of a stomach ache, because that's just sort of how it is normally.
We
Because
know when
that's what
our
we're
heart
using to
has
experience.
heartache, and like you're saying, Justin, when our heart has heartache, it's going to, in that real connection, that integrated connection that our physical heart has with the organ of our heart, has with the organ with our brain.
Yeah,
One can throw the other off. I always joke around and say that my brain is being hijacked by my bladder. And that's my friendly, sociable way to say, well, I need to use the ladies' room. I
exactly.
can no
I'm gonna
longer
step out for
think
a moment.
anymore because my other organ is commandeering my
Yeah,
brain.
yeah,
um, okay, so that said, okay, so I'm revisiting, I'm thinking about everything that we've spoken
mm,
about.
mm.
I'm I mean, we see transferable strengths. I love your example of the umpire. I think you said the umpire.
I coach hockey as well, and so I say referees all the time. But I was like, let's switch up and go with umpires in baseball.
My boyfriend was just talking about that. He said, you have no idea. He has two children. He's like, how insane it's gotten. I mean, parents have to take a 2 weeks, I think, in the state of New Jersey. I think they made it a law where if parents are harassing the umpire, the parent has to go home and be not in attendance to
Yeah,
those games for a couple of weeks until you reset. So
yeah,
every sector of business acknowledges that there needs to be a reset period of going, this is
yep,
how I was operating, and this is how I will now be operating moving forward. It's a
yeah,
distant, though it's a distant relative. It's to what it is that we're talking about. It's a microcosmic, and it's paralleling to the microcosmic of the world that I'm referring to. Because,
yep,
only 2% of our population really does sign up for the military.
yeah.
So it's
Very small.
incredibly, in some ways, microcosmic, and yet it takes up so much of our bandwidth as civilians, hearing about Iran and Israel, and every time that there's someone at each other's throats, we hopefully are all thinking about our service members and all saying in advance, advanced prayers are the best ways to utilize our neuroscape, affirming what we are laying down. Thank you, God, for protecting everyone as they are in the line of duty. Thank you in advance for keeping everyone safe. Thank you for creating reduced harm for everyone, our nation, and everyone involved, if and when possible, and creating resolution as soon as possible. Okay. Anything that you want to sign off? Just tell me your website one more time for this go and this round of getting together on
Yes,
this virtual.
yes. Tacticalneuro.com, and you can find me on all of the social media channels except for TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. That's just how it's going right now, mostly because I don't really want to learn a new platform at this point. But
Tell me
everything
you
else,
didn't. Tell me you didn't do Threads.
I think I'm on
I don't
Thread.
understand the point, but whatever. I'm not on TikTok either. I'm not on Threads.
Yeah, yeah. I would say the easiest way to get a hold of me is uh, through the website, and or I still Instagram is still very much. I check the Facebook page as well. But what you will notice,
Hallelujah.
and this is just kind of unpurposeful for my part, is I separate out sort of my really public facing LinkedIn profile from this type of work that I do, just because I don't want to have all of the uh, I don't want to have all the attention. This audience knows how to get a hold of me through interactions like this, which are extremely meaningful, and through all the work that many people, including yourself, are doing to help this community so we can be better and more effective, and then also healthier and happier as we go through the rest of our lives, right? We find each other, I like to say, in a very polite way. And then the other, my favorite is, you do go and find me on LinkedIn, you're like, same guy, it's me, it's still me. uh, and I have a very public persona there as well, for sure. But this is something that is,
Absolutely, Justin, two top reasons why someone might reach out to you. What problem are they looking to fix? Two completely
yeah,
estranged, differing reasons as we sign off. Just throwing those out there so that people know what they're computing when they think, I really need to reach out to him, if they're still wondering.
I love it. I love it. So one, I'll do from the individual level, right? Individual who knows they're going to be going to do something very stressful, right? How do they prepare for that? How do they think about when they're doing that thing that's super stressful? And then how do they deal with it after they're doing the thing that was super stressful? And then larger and more pointedly is kind of that level of the groups, right? How do we get this group to behave in a more optimal way when we're making decisions under extreme stress?
Thank you. That's extremely coherent. You've had lots of practice, lots and lots of practice. We're so lucky that you have integrated this into your day and your week. We are just in the flat middle of the week. We're in the middle of Wednesday. It's just, how much more integrated do we get? We're at the heart of the week. Thank you again. And I'm looking forward to reaching out and seeing how we may support one another moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it again.
Thank you. Let's do this again. I like it. I like it.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you in advance.
Thank
Okay.
you. Appreciate you having me.
Okay. Bye, love.